Next on the Delaware Way, a Delaware politician on a very personal mission to try to pass an equal rights amendment in Delaware. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. Women's issues, equal pay, equality has taken the forefront in American politics and in American society with the Me Too movement and Time's Up. It is something that is being debated in Delaware, and Senator Stephanie Hansen has been in the forefront of that. She represents Middletown, Bear, Glasgow, and Newark. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Let's talk about, for a moment, sexual harassment in politics. How prevalent is it, or has it been in politics?
In politics, I don't think we hear a lot about it in the Delaware General Assembly in politics. I think, though, in the workplace in general, it's much more prevalent than a lot of people believe.
Now, as you were coming up, as you were rising up in the ranks, were you a victim?
I was in my younger days. Back when it was in the 80s or so. I was actually working as a goldsmith and appraiser in a jewelry store downstate as a young woman with a young child. I experienced many of the things that a lot of women are still talking about today. In particular, I was in a job where I was having to train my successor in the job when I was leaving, who was a young man who did not have the degrees. I had 2 degrees to do what I was doing. I had a master's degree in geology, a certificate from the Gemological Institute of America for diamond grading, and I had done appraisals and been doing appraisals for years, and I was making $5 an hour. And so I tried really hard to get 25 cents, a 25-cent raise while I was there, and was told, no, you can't get it. We don't have that in the budget. So I was getting ready to leave after being there for about a year and a half-ish or so. And I had to train my successor, who was a younger man that was coming in, no degrees, no experience. And he said this is a great opportunity for him because he was now going to he had a great job. And I said, well, it is a good job, but they don't pay real good. He said, oh, well, no, they're paying me really well. I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, well, how much are you making? $11 an hour. So I went to my boss at that time. I said, how can you in good conscience do this? I couldn't get a 25-cent raise. And he said, he's a man. He has to take care of his family. I said, I have a family too. And I've got a daughter and I couldn't get 25 cents out of you. So the whole issue of pay equity, that's what we've just been talking about in the Delaware General Assembly, just, not this past January, but in the last session that we had. That's a very personal thing. So, if you want to talk about what is it...
But it's still, to your point that you're talking about it in the General Assembly now, it still exists.
It still exists.
That story you told from the 1980s still exists today.
It does. It still exists today. And I actually had one of the senators on the floor when we were talking about pay equity. He said, well, do we really need to talk about this anymore? Is this really an issue? And I said, yes, it is really, it's still an issue. It's been an issue for a long time, and it is still an issue.
And the protection of women in the workforce, it goes beyond pay equity, although that's extremely important, but it goes beyond pay equity. And to your point about it being in the workforce, when you talk about sexual harassment, the dialogue nationally seems to be about movie stars and singers and people and executives. That's not who were the victims, the everyday victims of sexual harassment. It's waitresses, it's maids, it's people in factories, it's people that are secretaries or I should say personal assistants. It's those are the people that are real victims, and that's where the protection doesn't come in. Are they doing something in Dover about that?
I think as part of a larger movement and forcing the conversation about this and raising the bar as to what's acceptable is the most important thing that we can do. Because there's a level of behavior that has been acceptable for a long time because no one has talked about it. And what we're doing right now with this large national conversation that we're having is we're saying that's not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable then, but we were quiet about it. It is not acceptable now. We're no longer quiet. So we're raising the conversation level.
But doesn't it behoove, isn't it the responsibility of state legislators to get behind this national movement and make sure that there is protection and that there are avenues available for women who may be victims every single day who don't happen to be movie stars? And look, they were powerless.
Yes.
I can't imagine what a waitress has to go through. Shouldn't there be some mechanism for them to go through if it's not already available?
We should be doing a lot more. And I think one of the things that I believe will help to at least set the groundwork for this is the Equal Rights Amendment. And I'm going to be the prime sponsor of that in the Senate. And what that will do is it simply states that, we are not going to discriminate on the basis of sex. So although we may have particular parts of the Delaware Code right now, like the housing code in particular, where it says you can't discriminate based on sex, we need a larger overarching statement that says we are not going to discriminate based on sex generally, so that it captures all the different things that can bubble up from that, including harassment in the workplace, and many, many other things that we don't even comprehend at this point.
So what do you see coming out of this? You see a comprehensive bill, a comprehensive piece of legislation that's going to deal with each one of these specifics: pay equity, equality in the workplace, sexual harassment?
Well, I don't know that I can say a comprehensive bill to deal with each of those specifically, but the Equal Rights Amendment is a constitutional amendment that will then lay the framework for saying we are not discriminating based on sex. So
we have an Equal Rights Amendment in the country, but an Equal Rights Amendment you're talking about?
Well, we don't have one of those in our Constitution. The U.S. Constitution,
You're saying that the U.S. Constitution doesn't give us equal rights?
It wasn't ratified by the number of states that it needed to be by the time for it to make it into the Constitution. So now we have the individual states that are left to, can you get this into your Constitution, the Equal Rights Amendment in the Delaware Constitution.
But you do believe that the U.S. Constitution, as it exists right now, gives us equal rights?
The 14th Amendment, yes, it does. But no discrimination based on sex is what I'm talking about, sexual discrimination.
And so Delaware is going to do what you're saying, what the federal government has failed to do?
Correct. That's correct. Get it in our Constitution that there will be no discrimination based on sex.
And you don't think, if you have that, you don't believe that there's any legislation specifically or any statement specifically that Dover has to make about sexual harassment in the workplace other than the Equal Rights Amendment? If you do that, that takes care of that.
You can probably always do more. I just don't know specifically what that would be today.
But you're interested in that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. After having lived through that and knowing that it's still so prevalent, yes, I am interested in that.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation. Senator Stephanie Hansen from District 10, which includes Middletown, Bear, Glasgow, and Newark, when the Delaware Way continues.